Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, my guest is Nancy Landrum. Nancy has a master's degree in spiritual psychology. She's an author. She's a relationship coach. And she's also the creator of the Millionaire Marriage Club. Nancy is a past speaker and presenter on my summit, Finding Connection After Relationship Trauma. And we have big plans to collaborate on future projects together, which will be a surprise. So please stay tuned. Nancy, thank you for being a guest on my show today.
It's such a privilege to be with you, Karen.
Thank you. Now, I just read an itty-bitty witty part of your bio because I didn't want to be talking for ad nauseum. Can you share a little bit more on your decision to become a relationship coach?
Depends on how far back you want me to go. I say my story started when I was probably around 3 years old, when the constant bickering between my mom and dad was so disturbing to me. It upset me. I decided at a very young age I'm going to have a happier, more loving atmosphere in my home than I experienced. And honestly, I didn't realize that was they didn't know how to love each other, and they did a great job of taking care of their children, but they didn't do a very good job of nurturing love or confidence or comforting at times. I don't ever remember being praised for anything, no matter how well I did. So that kind of set the trajectory of my life, was having that high priority of learning how to create and sustain a happier, more loving marriage.
So then you married the perfect guy and had the perfect marriage. That's your story, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, it turned out he was a very good man, but he didn't know any more about communication or intimacy than I did. And I spent the first couple years telling him what he was doing wrong because he wasn't making me happy. And of course, that didn't go over very well. And finally, I got desperate enough one day, shortly after our first son was born. I was on the floor on my olive green shag carpeting back in the day when that was a big deal, and just told God, I will do anything to change the trajectory of this marriage. I'm even willing to change if you'll just tell me what to do. And I suspect that God chuckled and said, okay, I finally have her attention. Because I got a few whispering tips that I put into practice that made an enormous difference in the quality of relationship that we had. We talked more, we laughed more, we had more fun. And it wasn't perfect. I had crabby days. But unfortunately, we only had 4.5 years together before he died unexpectedly. And talk about trauma. I was 23. I had 2 baby boys, 2 years old and 8 months old. And I had no idea how to cope with that level of pain. And all I knew to do is get up in the morning and give the boys breakfast and change a diaper and do the laundry, and putting one foot in front of the other. It was the only way I knew. And I didn't have the wisdom to seek a counselor. In my religious community at the time, going to a counselor was like admitting your faith in God wasn't good enough. And so it took about 5 years for me to begin to think that life could be good again. It was an agonizing 5 years. The blessing was that I had two babies to take care of. I wanted to die, but I didn't want to leave them without either of their parents. And they kept me alive until finally life began to look good again.
Yeah. Can you share a couple of things that you did that was healing to you?
I
Maybe your faith?
My faith was one of the things I clung to. And in particular, for those who are familiar with the Bible, I memorized Psalm 139 in the Living Bible, which talks about God's constant care of us and being in charge of everything. And I had a couple of friends that, well, I belong to a huge church, but being a widow at 23 is an oddity. It's just very unusual. And some of the women at church avoided me because they didn't want their husbands being around a young, pretty widow. That was shocking to me. And I became a target for unscrupulous men. And fortunately, I had very good antenna and didn't fall for some of the tactics that were used on me.
Was this
But
men in the church or outside of the church? Or both?
both.
Okay, so then that's some spiritual trauma, religious trauma too. Because our church home is supposed to be safe and often is not. Yeah.
It's supposed to be safe, and sometimes there's safe people and there are unsafe people, and you can run into them wherever you are.
This is true. Yes.
Wherever you are. I remember the first winter, my husband died in August, and I don't know what made me wise enough to do this, but I wanted one place in my life where I wasn't known as the young widow. And so I enrolled in a course at the junior college near me on oral presentation. And it was about reading out loud for an audience. And it was the only place in my life at that time where no one knew that I was a widow. And it was the only place I felt normal, and it was fun. It was something I enjoyed doing. And then I had a couple of friends that were just very comfortable for me to be around. And I would pack up the boys, and one of my friends lived up in the high desert, and we'd go spend a couple days there. And then a friend from church who was married, but she wasn't at all threatened by me, and she and her husband both were very comfortable with me. I tried to hang out with people that I felt safe with, and that helped those first few years.
Beautiful. And so then what's the next chapter of your story that led you to being a relationship coach?
I was single mom for 13 years, and then a mutual friend introduced me. One other point here, I did a little bit of dating, but it seemed like the men I dated thought that they needed to rescue me. And that offended me. I thought, I don't need rescuing. So I was smart enough to turn down those options. But a mutual friend introduced me to Jim Landrum, his wife had died after a long illness. He had 3 children. When we married, we had 5 children between us, and 4 of them were teenagers. And actually, we did something very smart that we didn't realize at the time. We agreed to keep single parenting our teenage children. We figured they weren't in a good spot to try to accept another stranger as a parent. We had some difficulties because we wanted to co-parent his 8-year-old son. And if we didn't understand the very complicated dynamics that happen in a step family. So Jim was an easygoing, very permissive parent. I was more structured, and it didn't mix very well. And we would make agreements for rules and consequences for Jimmy. And then if Jimmy was unhappy, Jim would blame me for enforcing the rules we'd agreed on. And the disagreement became more and more, we got more and more entrenched in our respective positions. So my goal was to convince Jim that he was wrong and I was right, that Jimmy needed more structure. But Jim's goal was to convince me that he was right and I was wrong. We finally that's what finally led us to find a coach who began to teach us. By that time, we really needed anger management skills. We needed better communication skills. And we were so desperate by the time we finally found her that we put into practice everything she told us almost immediately. And she basically said, if you keep delivering your messages with sarcasm or yelling or the accusatory, you're going to keep escalating into fights. So phrase what you need to say anything you need to say, but say it in what is now known as I language. So when this happens, I feel such and such, or this is what I wish we could do, or I really love it when you, it's all speaking from your own point of view. And the first time we sat down to talk about our hot issue using that language, we made it through 40 minutes without it escalating into a fight for the first time in years. It was so exciting. We were exhausted from the effort because we were having to translate our habitual ways of speaking to each other into this new I language. But so we agreed to set it aside for that day. We stood and I stepped into Jim's open arms and he said, that felt so respectful. Let's do our best to treat each other with respect. And that day, our goal changed from proving each other wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, to being respectful to each other 24/7, which included having to learn some better anger management skills. We went on to have multiple, what I call now, skilled discussions, respectful discussions about our issue. And the more we were able to hear each other's point of view, the more empathy we had for each other's point of view, until we were finally able to agree on a solution that worked. But from that day, in our first skilled discussion, when we set the goal to always treat each other with respect, we never had another fight. And we had 17 more years together before Jim passed away. And in that 17 years, we never even had a harsh word between us. So after a few years after, yeah, it was like this constant flow of loving between us that was never interrupted. A few years after we got our marriage on track, Jim suggested we begin teaching other couples what we'd learned because we had so much trouble finding effective help. So we began
It's a thing. It's a real thing. Finding good help.
It is, you go shopping. We went shopping. We had 3 different appointments with therapists and made it clear, we're coming to interview you. We don't expect to pay for this appointment. And in all three cases, they didn't seem to know what to do with us. They didn't have any clear plan of action. And we read books, we went to seminars, and finally we found this coach that just gave us exactly what we needed. And then we began teaching other couples what we had learned. We taught together for 11 years, wrote the first book together called How to Stay Married and Love It. We wanted to stay married like our parents had, but we wanted to love it more than it appeared they did. So I began coaching couples who were in our classes but needed more personal support than they got from our classes. And I just, as soon as we turned what we had learned into this product that we could offer other couples, it was like I came home. I knew that was where I belonged. So after Jim died, I was fortunate to have the support of some good friends in the marriage education field until I got my feet under me again and began developing a private practice and writing several more books. It was a long journey and it was very painful, but that pain was what motivated us to begin teaching other couples what we had learned.
And then you have more books that have come out since then, is that right?
Excuse me?
You've had other books come out since that time.
I've written altogether 8 books. I'm currently working on my 9th.
Wow.
Lately I've been evaluating where my energy goes, and I realize the things that give me the most joy is coaching couples, writing, doing some gardening work, occasionally making a quilt. But those are the things that really feed my energy. And when I spend energy in other places that drain me, I really have gotten sensitive about noticing what people I'm around that drain my energy and what friends I'm with that feed my energy, that are encouraging to me, and what activities give me joy and what activities are just such a drain, an energy drain.
Yeah, that's so important to find the people around us that give us a higher level of energy boost, that higher vibration. We really thrive when that's happening. So it sounds
Yes,
like that's huge for you.
it's been a lifetime learning process because, like many women, I grew up thinking I had to please everybody. But when I please others that drain my energy, I pay for it. And
Yes.
I've gotten just far more selective. Like for me, this may shock some people, but I really don't like going to baby showers or wedding showers. The hen party atmosphere just drains me dry. So I promised myself a few years ago I'd never have to go to another shower. I'll send a gift and best wishes, and I love meeting with people that I love one-on-one or in a small group where I can interact with them relationally, but I don't like shower games and
Yeah.
it
It's
just,
good to know what gives you bliss and what doesn't. That's great. I love, especially as we get older, we really got to prioritize what really lifts us up and helps us feel better. Yeah.
I agree with that statement that I have a limited amount of energy and I want it to go in places that reciprocate energy, that help feed my energy rather than draining me.
Yeah. I think that's just simply wise, really.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
just recently had my 80th birthday and I think I am officially in the crone age, you know, where I'm old enough and hopefully wise enough that I can be considered a wise old crone.
That's beautiful. Do you want to talk about one of your books? And you are an accomplished author. Do you have a favorite book that talks about couples healing or a couple of different books that you want to just quickly share with us?
My two favorite books are How to Stay Married and Love It, that tells the story of the skills that Jim and I had to learn to restore the love in our marriage. And I've had people tell me that it's like reading a novel. It's easy reading. It isn't written for a master's degree class. It's just very easy reading, where I open up I open the book to how bad it was between us and what we had to learn to transform our marriage. And then my second favorite book is Pungent Boundaries, which teaches the lessons that I had to learn to disconnect from codependent behavior, from people pleasing. I had the privilege of having one of my sons become a drug addict, which was just unfathomable to me. It was so hard for me to live with and accept, because he did me the favor. He did the favor of ripping off the Nancy, the great mother, the great wife, the wonderful person. He ripped off that mask and exposed to the world that my life wasn't perfect. And I had a lot of learning to do, as far as in the beginning, I kept trying to change him, trying to rescue him. I'd argue with him, I'd nag him, and none of that helped at all. It was the thing I'm the most grateful for, is that the lessons he taught me about needing to set appropriate boundaries to take care of myself and to not blame myself for the choices my son was making. That was huge, just huge.
Sounds huge. It sounds incredibly complicated and painful, and I'm thrilled you could find some lessons in there, because that's why we go through suffering, right? To learn those lessons.
I consider Stephen one of my greatest teachers. He forced me to go to depths of learning and acceptance that I would not have ever chosen without the challenges that Steve brought to me.
Yeah. And do you want to share what happened with Steve? You certainly don't have to.
Oh, sure. By the time he was 27, he had used cocaine and speed and pot for such a long time that it caused his heart to stretch, to enlarge. And he called me one evening and said that he was having trouble breathing, and could I take him to the doctor? And I didn't realize how serious it was, so I waited till the following morning, but found out he'd been sitting up all night because he was afraid if he laid down, he would drown, which was true. So when he got finally to the hospital later that day, his heart was twice the size of a normal human heart, and they gave him diuretics. He lost 22 pounds in excess fluid that had built up in his lungs and around his heart. So he couldn't go back to work. He was working as an electrician outdoors in the heat. He couldn't do that. So he came home to live with us at the age of 27, which was very challenging because he was still, I naively, even by this time, I naively assumed that if he knew he was dying, he would quit using. But addiction is so powerful. So incredibly powerful. So he kept using, even though he knew it was killing him. And I had 2.5 years with him before he died. And by that time, his heart was 13 centimeters wide, which is 3 times the size of a normal heart. But I continued to learn during those 2.5 years that were very challenging, extremely challenging. Challenging is a nice word to say.
So you mean they were hell?
They were hell. It was very hard. Just one of the boundary lessons I learned, I think, is it conveys the concept of good boundaries. He brought his motorcycles, a lot of tools, a lot of stuff, and he basically took over the garage. And I just kept saying, please leave a pathway on this against this wall so that I can get to garden tools and to the washer and dryer. And his stuff kept migrating over into my area, and it was so irritating. I'd trip over it. I'd remind him multiple times, and he couldn't seem to remember. So finally, I got tired of feeling irritated with my beloved son, who was basically dying. And so I got some masking tape and put a masking tape on the concrete floor of the garage and gave myself like a 3 foot wide sidewalk against that wall. And I said, Stephen, do you see the masking tape? And he said, yeah. And I said, anytime I find anything of yours on my side of the masking tape, I'm going to put it in the trash. Okay, Mom, no problem. And a few days later, I went out to do the laundry, and there was a motorcycle engine on the washing machine. And I thought, okay, he
Here we
understood.
go.
He understood the boundary. He said, okay. He knew, what I was going to do. So I just didn't say a word. I just quietly put his motorcycle engine in the trash barrel. And no nagging, no reminding, took all the drama out of that discipline. And a couple days later, he said, Mom, do you know where my motorcycle engine is? And I said, yeah, it's in the trash. I found it on my washing machine. And he didn't argue. There was no anger. He just nodded his head and went out and got it out of the trash. And it never happened again. He never left stuff on my side of the masking tape again.
You've told me this story another time, and I love it. And it's actually the masking tape thing is actually how I would teach trauma survivors about physical boundaries. We would actually map out how much they would need with the masking tape. So I love that story. Okay, but we are indeed running out of time, but I do have one more question for you. Actually, before I do that, is there anything else you want to see about Steve and passing him and anything on your heart about that you want to share?
I got a message from Steve after he died because I was so sorry for all the times I'd been hard on him or hadn't been the best mom I could have been. And he very clearly said, Mom, all the ways you hurt me and all the ways I hurt you is just stuff that happens on earth. And he said, now we're free to just love each other. And I really
That's
do.
so powerful.
I really do sense his support, his encouragement of me. I knew he would be totally comfortable with me telling his story along with my side of his story. I just want to say about boundaries that unless you have a clear boundary and a clear consequence, then a boundary without consequences is just a worthless threat. You have to be prepared to enforce the consequences, or it's not a real boundary.
That's right. Okay. Now for my last question, so we've got to wrap up. Tell us just really quickly what Millionaire Marriage Club is and why somebody would benefit from being a member.
Millionaire Marriage Club is the online course that I created in 2016 that teaches all the skills that Jim and I learned to transform our marriage from very conflicted and unhappy to the happiest marriage that we both had dreamed of when we fell in love. There are 9 modules that cover different aspects of communication and anger management, along with maybe taking a look at your beliefs, because sometimes we adopt limiting beliefs about men or about women or about marriage that can negatively influence the quality of our marriage. So it's very easy it's just a series of short video tutorials that are very simple and easy to watch or to listen to. And I think it's one of the easiest ways for couples to get the kind of skills that they need to improve the quality of their marriage is to watch a 20-minute video every night.
I agree. It sounds amazing, Nancy. Thank you for offering that to all the couples out there that could just use some more support. Sometimes it's hard to improve if you don't know what to work on.
We're all doing the best we know how to do at any given time, and we don't know what we don't know. Like Jim and I, if we had known the skills that we learned from our coach, it would have saved us years of unhappiness. But we didn't know that there was answers out there that we weren't aware of. I'd love to, if anyone listening to the podcast wants to try out one of the modules, I've recently set up the conflict management or anger management module as a free giveaway. So if
that's so generous. Thank you.
If any of you are hurting from the level of conflict in your marriage and you'd like to learn how to do it better, then just email me at nancy@nancylandrum.com, and I'd be happy to send you a link to that module.
That's beautiful, Nancy. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on my show today.
Thank you, Karen. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.